Bonjour, bonjour, bonjour. And welcome to the REC experience.
That's the extent
Jas
of it.
Takhar. Laura, did you like that?
Bonjour.
Well, I thought it would be fitting. We went to Montreal.
At least put on an accent a little bit.
So how would you have
Do it
said it?
up.
With your French accent. I want to hear it now.
No.
Well, some of the viewers, everybody wants to hear this
that.
stuff.
Oh, bonjour.
Oh, so it's like that.
Right,
Nice.
yeah.
I like it.
I think
like
so.
it. Well, we had an amazing time in Montreal. Lots of fun. Lots of eating.
Lots of eating.
Myself, you, Simeon,
Our boy Steven. Yeah.
who a lot of you don't get to hear or see. But he's actually our graphic designer, among a lot of other things. I mean,
He
there's
likes
probably,
to keep in the quiet, in the background.
yeah,
for
the
sure.
amount of times I try to get him on camera for the vlog or for anything, he always fights back. But shout out to Steven. He played the role of a videographer as Clem was tied up. Our boy Keegan.
An overall lion tamer, I would say.
Who's that?
Like, he's got to
Steven?
corral us. and
Yeah. Steven's really good with that. But we went to Montreal not to just try to learn French or eat a lot of food. We really went there for an investor group that actually asked us to come by and talk about what's happening in the Greater Toronto real estate market,
Yeah.
as well as specific strategies that we're seeing investors use. And so what you guys are going to be hearing and watching in a little bit here is a live event where myself and Simeon talked about those things, right? Like strategies that
Yeah, it was a
work.
great event. Lots of great questions.
Yeah.
But we should also mention that previous to us doing this event, we got to see an amazing $8.6 million condo, I believe.
$8.6 million condo.
And so we did a video on that. So
Yeah.
for
Penthouse
those of us
as well.
following us, it was at
Penthouse.
the Ritz Carlton.
Similar to the one
For
like
sale.
Penthouse that we did in Hudson Yards,
And the one in Toronto
and
at
on
Four Seasons.
Four Seasons. So if you guys haven't been watching those tours that we're doing, take a look at them. We'd love to get your feedback. But
Because they're super fun for us. So
you
we
fell
hope,
in
we
love
hope
with
that
the-
you guys are enjoying them too.
you fell in love with the realtor. Like she was just awesome.
She was amazing.
She was amazing. She actually brought us into her place as well
Which
afterwards.
I think I liked a little better.
Yeah.
We didn't get any of that on film. But
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
But the 8.6, that chandelier.
I've never seen anything quite like that.
Actually, I haven't.
It
And
was
so
a tree
It really was,
shaped
right?
like a tree.
With the event that we put on later, huge shout out to Jessica Furtado for putting it together,
Yeah.
as well as Ali LaBelle, two people, and among others, but those two kind of headed up the event and asked us to come. We had a lot of fun taking the train.
Taking
there.
the train.
We
It
couldn't
was
get
fun.
a flight in time.
Couldn't get a flight.
Last minute, like
Took
we
the
had
train,
to.
which was a lot of fun. We got to do a lot of work on the way there.
Well, that was the interesting part about the train. Like, it was the first time I ever been on a train, like a Via Rail and going somewhere like that. And so I really enjoyed it because we were able to do some work, enjoy a couple of bevies, cold ones along the way
and
as
then
well.
when there's no like security.
Yeah, like
you don't
nothing
have
to
go
check
through
in.
all
There's nothing like
headache.
that.
It was
You
so
could
easy.
show up 5 minutes before.
And then you land right downtown Montreal.
That was really good
so
as
I think
well.
I would definitely do that again.
And it was interesting to also see with Montreal, like all the construction that's happening. Like we talk about the pre-construction stuff in condos and stuff that's happening here in Toronto, obviously, because that's where we do all of our business. But it was nice to just see like Montreal real estate starting to perform like it did way back. Like you always talk about the story that your dad used to work in Montreal.
Yeah, my parents worked in Montreal. My dad worked for the Bank of Montreal. And then obviously when, some things, murmuring started happening with Quebec leaving, most of the major banks that were there, they decided that it was time for them to leave. And so my dad got moved to Toronto, and that's why I'm here now. And unfortunately, I never got taught how to speak any French.
Not even in school? You never took it?
Well, I took it in school.
Yeah.
Till like grade 10. But
because even while we were there, you weren't really speaking much French. You didn't.
Well, it depends how many drinks I'd had.
That's true. Actually, when you did,
my French seems to go up the more beverages.
I mean, Toronto restaurants and lounges are amazing, but there were some places in Montreal that
I would definitely go back. And kudos to you. You were like our little faux tour guide.
Yeah,
you certainly know how to use the Google.
I was going to say the Google. Not that I know Montreal that well. Been there tons of times, but never really had to play kind of the tour guide, so to speak. But just using technology was fun. And I think I hit some really good bangers with the restaurants and
definitely
and
they
the
got some
lounges
good spots. So if you need any, want some of these recommendations, feel free to reach out.
Well, I'd have to look back and see what I saved in
To
my
see what you remember.
recent
Yeah,
history and stuff. Other than that, we're back here now in Toronto. It's been really busy. It's starting to get a little cold here. However, as usual, our team of 32 realtors, and I really want to talk about that really quickly, Laura, because not a lot of people know that we actually have a team of 32 realtors.
I think they think it's just like the 4 of us.
Well, and then all the media guys. But there's actually a very large and successful team that is with us as well. Again, 32 realtors that cover right across the Greater Toronto area. So essentially from Durham to Burlington, Newmarket to the Lake. Not all of our realtors are investment real estate focused.
Yeah, I would say the majority of them
help with like a first-time home buyer and
people just moving up grading and downsizing.
Well, you call it smart, like you came up with smart sizing. Because we see a lot of that in the city, right? Because I hear a lot from you, like as our director of sales and marketing, which you tend to focus most of your daily efforts with investors, with the investors, and on the pre-construction side. But you also know a lot of our team members. You originally came on as a team member.
Yes, I did. Yeah,
and then when did you make the switch?
I made the switch about 3. It's pretty much coming up on 3 years ago now. I was sort of working an area. A lot of realtors will farm a market, so to speak, and I was doing that. I was working in the area that I live in, which happens to just be right where our office is here at Don Mills.
And Drake being your neighbor.
And Drake, I always say Drake is my neighbor. He's 7 streets away, and that's the truth.
So you were going to work this area, and then...
And, it was great. I enjoyed it for sure. But then I just got to see what you guys were up to and just the amount of deals and transactions. And I knew I would learn a lot faster if I was sort of had myself immersed in sort of day-to-day transactions. And I've learned way more in the 3 years than I did in those first 2.
As I mentioned that it's getting cold, we're coming up to, at the time of this recording, at the end of November now. And it's a special time for all of us because we put on a huge event.
Our Spirit of the Season.
In partnership with...
Sick Kids.
And so anyone who's watching or listening, we would, I always end off by saying, I can't wait to meet you in the flesh and meet you face to face. This is your opportunity for anyone who's watching, anyone who's listening. Please get in touch with us. If you're going to be in the Toronto area on Friday, November 29th, we have, it's our 4th annual Spirit of the Season. 6:30 to 10 at CC Whiskey Lounge. Awesome place.
Oh, it's super cool.
Right? Like the 1920 Prohibition bar.
The chandeliers alone.
It's all about chandeliers. Holy crap. So we would love to finally meet you if we haven't already. And if we have, come again. Come and join us for a couple of drinks. Tons of food. We really throw a big event and a big bash. Great word for it. And so just get in touch with us. info@reccanada.com. Or just hit us up on any one of the socials or even on the YouTube page because we would really, really like to meet you because there's a lot of people watching and a lot of people listening, but we haven't met everyone. We were on a phone call today with one of our listeners. It was just neat to speak to somebody who's been watching and listening for a while, and now they want to get in touch with us to start talking about their portfolio. But I might not actually get to meet this gentleman for another couple of months.
Yeah,
and
that's true. So swing by.
Swing by just for even a drink.
And especially for the people who are listening to us, our weekly podcast, they have no idea what we look like. Now you get to see us in person.
Good point. If you haven't seen...
I'm way more attractive.
Altos. Well, the jury's still out on that one. If you haven't seen Altos Fashion Fridays, you'll get to see her in the flesh.
I'm already planning the outfit.
I'm sure you are. I'm sure you probably started planning it the day after last year's.
No.
This is like silly. A couple of now.
Don't be silly. Okay. Now for sure. Yeah.
Okay,
a couple of weeks in advance.
Guys, please, if you're watching or listening and you have not yet told your friends that this is the best real estate entrepreneurship leadership podcast in the world, do it now. Subscribe, follow us, and give us your feedback, because that's how we're going to get better. And we really appreciate everything in terms of all the support and the feedback that you've already given us. Thank you, guys.
Enjoy.
REC Experience presents Real Estate, Entrepreneurship, Leadership with your host, Jas Takhar. The REC Experience podcast is now on air.
For some of the people that don't know us, my name is Jas Takhar, and this is my business partner, Simeon. We have our Director of Sales and Marketing behind you, Laura Stewart. Some of the attendees here today have we've crossed paths before, but again, for the ones that we haven't met, both myself and Simeon have been in real estate now and working with investors coming up to about 15 years. We've also had the distinct pleasure of working very closely with Keyspire members, essentially since Scott and Michael started for the last 5 years. And so it's interesting because we collect a lot of data. When you're working with that many members over such a long period of time, right across the country, you get to figure out what works really well and some of the mistakes investors make. And so today, what we really wanted to talk about is some of the strategies that investors have been using, specifically in the Toronto market. But as we were just speaking to someone before we got started, and Simeon mentioned, they're really investment principles. So if it's Toronto, Montreal, India, Greece, and anywhere else in the world, the principles are generally the principles, right? And what you're looking for. And so we're going to talk specifically about 4 strategies, and we'll go for about 25, 30 minutes. And then afterwards, if there's questions that you're comfortable asking in this group setting, we're more than happy to take questions right from the front. And if not, we're going to be, myself and the rest of our team will be here for an extra, say, 20, 25 minutes to take any one-on-one questions. And if you wanted to actually sit down with us through a Zoom video conference, something similar to what we did a couple of months ago, you can actually go to reckeyspire.com. That's reckeyspire.com, like right on your phones, and schedule what we call a 15-minute coffee with us, just to get a better idea of what you're trying to accomplish. We'll show you how we might be able to help, because the truth is we can't help everyone. And then if it's a match, we'll go on to the next step. And if not, hopefully we brought some value to the conversation. But for now, we're going to get started speaking about what's happening in the Toronto real estate market. A lot of you
I just wanted to expand on something quickly.
Yes.
reckeyspire.com, that's a website that actually changes quite often, depending on what we're doing with Keyspire at the time. So if you do have a chance, every so often, if you think of us, go and check out REC Keyspire. It's our partnership with Keyspire's website. And it's typically related to either an initiative that we're selling at the time, where Keyspire thinks that there's enough value in the deal that they put it to their entire membership, or it's an strictly educational. So it depends on what's happening at the time.
So actually the one that we sent out through a webinar, it's actually going out, I apologize, at the start of next week. It is just an educational piece of content. Most of you know about, and this is our shameless plug time, but most of you know about our weekly podcast. At any time on any podcast platform, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, you can search REC Experience. Or if you want to see our handsome faces, you can go to YouTube and search the same name, REC Experience. But talking a little bit about the Toronto real estate markets, I mean, I think the question we probably get the most anytime we go to another city, and even our residents.
A cocktail party just like this.
Right? Or just people even living in Toronto. They always ask, can this keep on lasting? What's going on in Toronto? The fact that appreciations keep continuing to go this way. And what most people miss in that conversation is it really comes down to supply and demand. If you can talk a little bit about what our population growth is, and maybe then I'll go into the tech sector, Simeon.
Yeah, and I'm going to also do just one more footnote. Montreal right now has tremendous similarities to Toronto 10 years ago.
Yeah, exactly almost a decade ago.
There is one big difference that is not as exciting as Toronto, unfortunately, which is the employment and immigration factor. But everything else, and we can go into that after maybe our presentation, because I am the data guy. Like I study all kind of markets in our country, and Montreal is of tremendous interest to me right now because of you're actually benefiting from the ridiculous appreciation of the Toronto market, where it's actually pushed people out, and Montreal is literally the next best thing in Canada right now. So you're living in the second best real estate market in the country right now.
When you spoke about the immigration, with Toronto, you're seeing 150,000 people coming in year over year. And I see a lot of familiar faces that have heard me say that this is not going to stop, because it's 150,000 immigrants outside the country coming in for the next 10 years. So that's 1.5 million. And then one tough thing that we have, like figuring out exact numbers, is people driving down the 401 from Montreal coming to Toronto and Vancouver, and so the interprovincial. But that's generally looked at about another 300,000 for the next 10 years. And so to have 1.8 million people coming in 10 years, you need approximately every single year about 50,000 households to maintain that.
Doors.
So units. And we're only producing every single year. At the end of this year, I think we're going to end up at just south of 24,000. So less than half. So remember I said supply and demand? That is the basic principle of real estate investing. Like if you can figure out where there's a lack of supply but a high demand, you'll know that your capital that you're investing will be safe over time. And then with Toronto, specifically the tech sector, I know that really excites you. Talk a little bit about Google and Uber and Shopify and comparing it to Silicon Valley.
So what's happened in Toronto in the last, since I've been licensed, actually since before, I used to sell commercial real estate before I was licensed from a private owner. But since we really started getting into servicing the investment-focused market, which was back in 2007?
Yep. Right around there.
06,
yep.
7. Mm-hmm. We really started looking at the numbers, and that's it was 2 years before the U.S. went bust. Toronto was already on an upswing in the condo market. It was already really evident that there was a lack of supply to meet the demand. And I remember because at the time I wasn't making nowhere near the money that I make today, blessings on blessings, and I was renting and I was paying $800 a month, and I was paying $1,000 a month. This is year over year, $1,200 a month, where I had to say, what the fuck is happening here? Like, I'm not making that much more. I'm still a bartender at night, and I'm working at a call center during the day. Like, this is prior to. So you've already seen this. And then I get into real estate, and we're seeing it more. Toronto, so Canadian immigration policy, and Toronto specifically, attracts, I don't care where on the planet you're from. You know that Canada exists. You know that it's peaceful. It's kind of like a Switzerland of the world. They don't go and be rude to people. They don't pick wars. They don't fuck with anyone. Canadians are good people. That's the international reputation. So when somebody is choosing a place to go to, because even the tech sector is linked to immigration. The reason Google, Spotify, Uber, Muber, Suber, whoever, it doesn't matter what the startup next year is going to be, they want to be in Toronto because there is a workforce that's diverse, that is tremendously educated, that is wealthy. They're attracting the talent of the world in Toronto.
And it's very important to note when you're speaking about the tech sector is that when these companies are coming, they want to make sure that they're staying very close to urban centers, because who they're hiring is generally that age group of 25 to 35. And when you look at that specific age group, they generally don't need cars now. Like, cars is not something that they're not looking at it. And a lot of them, like we hire a lot of younger people on our team from a media squad perspective who does all the content for us. They're 25, 26, 20. They don't even have driver's licenses because it's not something that they
it's
attain.
Not an embarrassing thing. Like, I would be embarrassed.
Yeah.
These kids are like,
yeah.
Well, it's
some kind of an idiot.
Well, because it adds $1,000, right? It adds $1,000. It will add $1,000 a month to their monthly costs because you have car payment, you have gas, you have insurance, and so it's one of the biggest reasons that Toronto tech sector is actually outpacing Silicon Valley, New York, Chicago. Combined. I was going to make mention of this. All combined. And so knowing that you have the immigration and you have the tech sector, then now you want to start to look at what strategies work. What type of investments
and also everything that
at?
We're saying tonight on these subjects, like the 50% supply to demand ratio, that is an RB. So like we've known it because you can go back to our podcast and see it. Yeah. But RBC, the Royal Bank of Canada, put out the report 3 weeks ago, and the whole world went crazy. Oh my God, it's 50%. Like they need double the units. So these are all facts that you can Google.
Yeah.
When we say it's outpacing Silicon Valley, Chicago, and New York combined, Google it. This is real. It's happening today.
It's one of the main reasons that you've seen price per square foot for new builds. 10 years ago, we were looking at $500 price per square foot, and every single year and every couple of years, we see an increase to 600, 700, and even at 500, investors and purchasers thought like we were on drugs, saying that, look, guys, this is going to continue. We're now average price per square foot in Toronto at $1,250.
Average. And not a luxury product. Well, average, good product in the core.
And if you look at luxury product, which is always an interesting number. I mean, it's not really investor-focused product, but you want to see where some of the money is going. Our area of Yorkville, Toronto, is right now trading at $2,300 to $2,500 price per square foot. Now, it sounds crazy, but let's compare that to the other major cities in the world. And so when you compare it to Manhattan, $3,500 price per square foot, average again, and you're looking at London. Laura, our director of sales and marketing, was just in London a few months ago, and she took a picture of a condo, and the price per square foot was at $4,200 price per square foot. Paris is flirting around $3,000 to $3,500. Even in our own country, Vancouver, its average price per square foot is $1,900. And so when you look at Toronto and what Montreal is becoming, I think as long as you have enough people coming in and you're not able to build, like in Toronto, we have a greenbelt legislation, which essentially puts us on a real estate island. We can't build south of our city because we have the lake. And then on the northern part, running into southern Ontario, you have restricted land. So if when you drive there, it looks like we have a lot of green space to build on, but you actually can't because it's restricted. And so you no longer can build this way, you can only go upwards. So, but again, I want to talk really about, because I want to make sure we give you a lot of value. And so I was reading a lot of the comments in the Facebook group, and shout out to Jessica and Ali for putting not only this event together, but the actual platform within the Facebook group, because I was reading a lot of the comments, and you guys are asking for other strategies and what's working. And so what we've seen a lot of investors do very well in of recent is investing into a strategy which is rent to own. And so I want to speak a little bit about rent to own and how that process works. Kind of the macro level of that type of investment is we're partnering investors and tenants together, and where the investor is acting as the money partner, essentially buying the home for the tenant and holding it for a predetermined term. So you'd be purchasing something today for the tenant. The tenant would move in, and as an investor, you're going to be selling it after 3 to 4 years for a predetermined price today. Now that has its benefits, but it also has some things that you want to make sure that you consider. So why don't you talk about a couple of things that you want to consider, as well as the benefits on rent?
Yeah, so based on exactly the words that you used, everything is predetermined. So that is the benefit of the strategy, and that is the disadvantage of the strategy. So when a market like Toronto or Montreal, markets that are hot and appreciating, I'm gonna use Sean, excuse me. So I'm going to use Sean as an example. I'm going to buy a property today for $300,000. Sean is gonna buy the property in 4 years from today for $350,000. Predetermined, he's okay with that increase in price. Everybody's happy, and the contract is gonna be worked out. He's gonna pay his monthly rent, and he's also gonna pay his occupancy fee.
Well, let's talk about that really quickly, because as we put it into quotations, that's actually very important. So when you say there's a predetermined rent, call it $1,800, and then on top of that, the occupancy, which is the extra cash flow for the investor, what does that usually work out to? We usually work it out.
So first and foremost, so that specific amount is gonna be used as a forced saving plan for Sean. So Sean is paying his $1,800.
Yep.
He put his $15,000 or $20,000, whatever, in the beginning, and now $500 a month.
Yep.
Let's call it, is the occupancy fee. $500 is $6,000 a year. Over 4 years is $24,000. That $24,000 in extra cash flow is your cash flow, which is why rent to own or lease to own is such a popular strategy, because it produces high cash flow today. To him, that's his savings plan. That's going to be put against the purchase price. To you, the project every day becomes less and less risky. You're picking up money for the future today. And when he closes on it, he closes on it at that price. Let's go back to the disadvantage. The Montreal market is piping hot. Instead of appreciating at 4% that you negotiated with Sean, it went up by 7%, by 8%, by 9%. Like in Toronto, we had 14% year over year 3 years ago.
We had 17.1 at one.
14% had outpaced our earnings for the year. My condo went up by almost $250,000. That's insane. But so if you were tied to a deal at 4 points, well, you just took a bath.
Yeah.
Now, remember, this is a strategy that is specifically for people who like structure. There is no risk in the strategy. This guy who just picked up 14% or 8% and is only paying you 4 has so many incentives to close. You have helped him become a homeowner. You yourself helped a person become a homeowner. There's a lot of good things to it. But if you are a money-only guy, look at the rest of the world, just money.
Yeah.
You took a bath.
Now, in the last 5 years that we've done approximately 60 to 70 rent-to-owns, very rare do you see where that comes into play, where the investor loses for that big. And so I want you to feel very comfortable.
I was being a little dramatic.
Yeah, Simeon can get like that sometimes. So you very rarely would see that type of loss, where it really comes down to the opportunity. You would never really lose your capital. But one of the main reasons people go towards a rent to own is because of that extra cash flow that we were speaking about. It's probably one of, not the, in my opinion, one of the highest cash flowing property investments in the repertoire that we see investors use.
High cash flow,
Yeah.
fixed return,
Yeah.
fixed term. The advantages outweigh anything all day long. It's a tremendously popular and amazing strategy.
Now, the one thing that is tough with the rent to own is that they just don't come out as often, because what we know out of experience, to find one qualified tenant, because in our example that we were using with our friend Sean, he needs to have at least $15,000 to $20,000 as a deposit. I'm good, thank you. As a security deposit, as well as we need to make sure that not only can he qualify to pay the monthly rent, but he has to, that extra delta, that cash flow, that occupancy, what we're putting away for him. So we need to usually go through about 50 applications with tenants to get the one qualified tenant. So if it's something that you're interested in and you just want us to keep you posted, just make sure that you're what we call an REC insider, and we'll always keep you posted with those opportunities. We don't get them at mass. Like, we're not going to get 10 rent-to-owns at the same time. If that happens, that's something to definitely look at. We might get 1 or 2 every few months or so often. The other type of, did you have a question in the back?
Yes, sorry.
Yeah.
The $15,000, $20,000 you're saying they have to come up with as a deposit.
Yes.
That deposit, does it go towards something at the end that gets deducted, or it's money?
That's going to be Sean's.
$350.
Exactly. So we want, because remember, as the investor here, we are really doing this to help someone who cannot get financing for a home. Like, that's a big part of it. It's not the only reason, obviously, as an investor. We're doing it to make money, but we want to make sure that the investor, the tenant closes on the property in 5 years. So some investors come to us and say, well, okay, let's not use 5% year over year as the appreciation mark. Let's use 8. The problem with using 8, because some of the tenants will say, sure, let us get in the house now, we'll close on it in 3-4 years. The problem is if the market doesn't get to 8% year over year, the tenant won't get the financing from the lender in a 3-4 year time period. And so the appraisal won't come through. So we want to make sure that it's fair. It's a win-win partnership between the investor and the tenant. Question?
What's your role in that transaction?
So we essentially put the investor as well as the tenant together. Okay.
And who pays you?
No, we're joint venture partners.
Yeah.
We run it. You're like, there is options for you to do it on your own.
Yeah.
We're not going to be involved in those because there is room for error, and we know the deals are structured in a way that we're in all lease-to owns at this point.
Yeah.
I think it's safe to say we're going to be a JV partner operating the whole thing. It will be 100% passive to you.
So JV with you?
Yes. Yeah.
And what's the percentage of this partnership, what you ask for?
So it's a slide.
As an example.
So it would be a sliding scale depending on purchase price. So if we were, Simeon, maybe you can talk a little bit about that, exactly what the cost would work out to be.
So you're looking at a return at about 20 to 24% per annum on a lease to own. You would be giving up approximately 30 to 40% of the back equity on the deal, and you would be looking at 25% of the cash flow for property management. They're fairly intensive. The reason they're so attractive, even with JV partnerships, is because the cash flow is so high. So there's so much money in the deal where it makes a whole lot of sense, and especially when all the work is taken out and done with professionals. Like, we've established our partnerships with
Third party, yeah.
the biggest players in the space. There's actually a huge lease-to-own symposium in Niagara Falls. I think it's actually this weekend.
Yeah.
CARUP, the Canadian Association of Rent-to-Own Professionals in Niagara Falls. And the firm that we work with is actually the president of the association. It's Homeowners Soon. So there's a big partnership. We run the entire thing top to bottom, from locating the tenant, from structuring the deal legally and otherwise, and taking it straight to exit.
I think it's also important. Oh, question.
Well, first of all, I have a lot of questions about rent to own because this is what I want to do down the road, especially with the stress testing. Should I wait till the
Yeah, so if you don't, it's just for the sake of time,
Sure.
what we can do is, why don't you ask the questions kind of one-on-one afterwards when we're complete. I wanted to mention.
Carry on.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. In any type of income property that we'll always bring to the table, it would be nothing less than 20% year over year. In fact, and this is just my opinion, because I'm an investor myself, is from an income property perspective, anything that you see less than 20% year over year, you probably shouldn't even touch it. Because there's so many properties where you can invest in that you can get really closer. I think we were being very conservative, even in the rent to own, saying 20 to 24%. But why invest into an income property when you're getting 17, 18? You should probably look at a mortgage investment at 12, 13, where it's a lot more passive.
Oh, sorry, Jas. Just to be clear, 2024 to you,
Yes.
because there's a JV structure.
Exactly.
The deal's at 35%.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
And so,
Which is why we structure it that way.
And even going into any other type of income properties, you always want to be up above 20%. Otherwise, just look at a different type of investment within real estate, because again, you can get something higher. Multiplexes is something that we're seeing, and we have seen investors win in for the last 100 years. And that's right across, obviously, not only our country, but the continent and the world, because of, specifically in Canada, is the financing requirements are a lot easier when it comes to a multiplex, because it's not based on you as an applicant. Again, it will only be around 30 to 32% year over year, but there's a higher cost of entry when you're looking at a multiplex. In Toronto, you'd be closer to probably about, and I would say the Greater Toronto area, and for anybody who doesn't know the Greater Toronto area, it's probably about 100-kilometer radius. The cost of entry in terms of your down payment would be about $250,000 to $300,000. Now, with that said, you're also going to see higher cash flow. You're going to see $400-500 a month positive. However, there's a little bit more to manage because now you don't have, it's not one unit or two units, especially if we're looking at a multiplex where we want the financing to be determined by the rental income. We need to go 5 doors and above. Anything you want to talk about when it comes to multiplexes to add on, Simeon?
I mean, you're going down exactly the right path. The entire structure of the multiplex, the reason you're doing it is to mitigate risk. So when we buy a property for $1 million downtown Toronto, that is a detached property that has 2 doors, versus buying an 8-plex 30 kilometers outside the core for $1.2 million, and I have 8 tenants versus 2 tenants. When the downtown property has 1 person leaving, you have a 50% vacancy versus 15% vacancy. So we're talking, as you advance through your portfolio, as you go through 1, 2, somebody, the lady right there was telling me earlier, I've hit a wall, like I'm restricted because my financing now is, like I'm tapped out. So when you start hitting that wall after your 4th, 5th, 6th property,
or retirement,
whatever the case may be, that's a very real obstacle. This is where multiplex comes in. Because you may be sitting on $1 million in the bank, you might be sitting on 500 or 300, whatever the case may be. You might have the capital, but even if you have the capital, if you can't get financing, you're not getting anything. With multiplex, you can, because you're going to use the income from the actual asset itself to service the debt. So whether you're retired, whether you're self-employed or otherwise, as long as you have the capital, as long as you have the capital, you can get into the market, and it's. Again, to just reemphasize what you're saying, to say it's a proven strategy is an understatement. It's you're a housing provider. You're a housing provider to the market. So it's the best of all.
Is student housing a popular strategy here in Montreal?
it should be.
Okay.
Not like Toronto.
No? Okay. So even in our area, and again, Greater Toronto, we generally talk about Greater Toronto area, not just Toronto, because now we're talking Toronto being 3 million, but Greater Toronto being 6.5 million in population, and prices are different. So in the media, you'll hear that the average price in Toronto for a single family home is slightly north of $1 million. That's not the average in the Greater Toronto area. The average is closer to 785, maybe just topped 800 the last stats came in. So that's a big difference, but it's like literally one street. So you could be in Toronto and then the other street is Mississauga or Richmond Hill or Brampton or like, for example, Brampton specifically from a student housing perspective is one of the most lucrative types of investments because they're actually set up legally for where you can invest, so you can rent it out as a student housing property. Where when I said about rent to own, it's one of the best cash flowing investments. And I said it's one of the best because I wanted to leave student housing. It is the best cash flowing investment opportunity because now you're flirting with 5 to 7, close to 1,000, and sometimes even higher in terms of cash flow.
You're retailing every ounce of a floor plan.
Yeah.
Retailing rooms. You're retailing a bathroom.
Yeah.
So it's you can't beat that.
Yeah. Now, as we always do, we don't want to paint a rosy picture with any type of investment option, specifically student housing, because that one, there's a lot of managing involved. And so you need to see where the scale is for yourself, and you got to gauge that in terms of risk, because now you're dealing with 7 tenants,
so and they're not time in the will,
and they're not professional tenants in terms of. So you want to make sure that you're okay with that. I mean, time. If you're investing from here into Toronto, you'll be doing this with a property manager anyways. But if you find something in Montreal, just understand that you probably still would want to bring in a property manager at 10%, because you don't want to take a call at 3 o'clock in the morning because 2 students started fighting each other.
10% is 10%
of the rental income. Yeah. So if we're renting it, the gross at $3,000 in the whole home, so you're going to be paying $300 a month. which is worth it. Because that allows you to come here and learn and have a beer and have some, right? And so you got to calculate what your time is worth in that sense.
Question. So how much is the average ROI for multiplexes in Toronto area?
27 to 33.
So I'll actually go back to what he said earlier. Unless the deal is 25% per annum plus, I don't care what strategy you're using.
20 at least.
20.
Right? Yeah.
So unless it's 20, we're not even going to touch it because you don't have to. Yeah. There's so many opportunities, whether they're student housing, multiplex, doesn't matter what strategy we use. Yeah. This is what we do for a living, is we structure deals every day based on what each individual investor is looking to do. So for you to ask what is the ROI in student housing, it's the highest of all, period. Yeah. Period. So if it doesn't work as high in Montreal than it does in Toronto, well, then go to Toronto. Yeah. If Toronto numbers are too high for you, go to Montreal. Yeah. It's that simple. You're not tied to any market.
I think you got to look at what you're comfortable with in terms of the down payment. That's kind of what will gauge where you'll go. When you look at pre-construction investing in condos, I get the question, probably the most asked question is 1 bedroom or 2 bedroom. Jas, what's better on the resale value? What's better rent? The rate of return, it's like 3% is a difference. 2 bedrooms are better. That's the short answer. Two bedrooms will always appreciate more, but it's a difference of like 3% from a 28% return to a 25%. Like, don't quote me on those exact numbers. But a 1 bedroom for me is, I love 1 bedrooms because the tenant's going to leave. I'm going to be able to increase the rent, right? Also, talking about the down payment, it's easier and it's less expensive to get into a 1 bedroom from a down payment structure perspective than it is a 2 bedroom. And so would you not look at that type of investment because you can't get into a 2 bedroom because the return is 3% higher? No, look at a 1 bedroom and just get in. Get in, right? And I see, again, faces that we've done pre-construction units with and other investments, but we bought at $800 price per square foot, and I know the building that just came up is selling for $900, and that's a 6-month period, an 8-month period. It's why that is pre-construction condos is the most the high demand type of investment in Toronto, because that's just where our city is now.
And maybe we'll share that article. We had an article back in February, March. We wrote for the
Canadian Real Estate Association.
Do you guys have the Canadian Real Estate Wealth magazine?
Yes.
Crew magazine, yes. Canadian Real Estate Wealth. Do you guys have that here?
Yes.
So if it's here, back in February or March, I can't remember which month it was the cover story. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of the story, we wrote the article, and it was kind of the story of us, like how we started investing and so it was, how do you grow a portfolio starting with, how do you retire in 20 years or in 10 years or
15 years? How do you retire? That was the title of it.
It was, give us a strategy. And we shared legitimately our story verbatim, which was, we didn't have a lot of money, so we just bought 1 unit. Market appreciated, refinanced, bought another unit. Market appreciated again, refinanced both, bought 2 more units. So what we did is not rocket science. It is the classic buy and hold. It's a classic BRR strategy. Buy, refinance, repeat. Yeah. Classic. Didn't reinvent the wheel, just did it religiously, on point, every time we could. So based on, again, growing markets, where you are in Montreal, I don't think you shouldn't invest in Montreal, I think you should. But I think you should also look at other markets, like the one we represent, as a tremendous choice. Look at it. Spend some time studying it.
Specifically with pre-construction, I think a lot of people shy away from it because it's so boring. Yeah. And they want something a little bit more exciting because we want an income property. We want to maybe tear down a home, and rebuild, and touch and feel it. My opinion on that, and we do this 250 times a year, and some of you have heard me say this in the past, like, I'm not trying to impress you by saying that. It really is to show you how much data we have. And so I really want to, more than anything, show you how much information we have from that perspective. So we're able to see what 250 people do every single year, right? Out of the 700 transactions that we help buyers, sellers, and investors with, that See, it allows you to be flexible with your capital because you're not putting your full 20% down all at once. It's actually paid over. Like we have a project that we just did.
Sorry, now we're talking about pre-construction investing.
Yeah, so it's specifically pre-construction, where the down payment, we just actually released it not too long ago, a couple of days ago. The down payment it's 10% now, 10% in like a year and a half. The final 5%, so obviously as investors we need to put down 20%. The final 5% is due at occupancy, which is like May 2023 or something, or the end of 2023, right? And so it allows you to get flexible because you can do more JVs with people. You can time it with maybe a short-term mortgage investment.
Why don't you talk about that a little bit? Let me stop.
In what sense?
The JV component. Yeah. I think that's brilliant. And we don't do enough of those JVs, to be honest.
Well, you have, and it's funny because this is the room that probably has done the most, so they really understand it.
The JVs they've done?
JVs, yeah, for pre-construction. So, yeah, which is really interesting, right? Because sorry?
We're still waiting to find out.
So I know the project that you're speaking about. I know exactly what you've made on paper already.
Which project?
Yes, Keely. And so that was one of our highest producing projects and investments of 2019, Laura. This was this year.
So why don't I give you an example about Wilson Heights and Downsview? Yeah. So you bought in Downsview. Okay, so Keely is in Downsview. That is a conversion of old airport lands in the center of the city of Toronto. Biggest land transaction in the city's history at almost just under not anymore. Downtown just got done a Unilever site. Yeah. So it's the second largest land transaction in Toronto's history at $750 million. Bombardier sold to developers. Yeah. And this is like one of the third or fourth building in the entire, like you're at the most ground level of ground level.
Oh, there's another 15 coming. And we're very excited for
acres
those.
on acres.
We want those.
So let's put...
As investors, we want those to come, especially in the downs. We started to cut you off. Yeah.
No problem. So Jas and I, so there's Keely, where we actually couldn't buy one for ourselves because we gave them to our clients. But then came Tretty, another project, literally, I don't know, a kilometer away.
It's a 6-minute drive.
Whatever. So you have proximity to the subway station at Downsview. We have at Wilson. Yeah. So it's one subway stop away, if you put it into perspective. You paid, let's call it $750 a foot, $800. We paid $820 4 months later. Today, Tretty Phase 2 is selling at $900 a foot.
No, it's actually $945.
And so
now that's the standard. Yeah. You're not going to get it for less. So you went from $800 to $945. I went from $825 to $945 or whatever the case may be, and you bought 2 months before me.
And where the JV component is interesting because 3 years when you need to actually close on this project, you have options. You have the option of closing on it by yourself, which is easy, and we all know how to do that. You can not close on it and assign it. So you can literally take that paper before you need to get the mortgage, so you don't, as the original purchasers, you don't have to pay all the closing costs. You can flip that, and we have a lineup of people waiting for on the other end of that. Okay. In fact, we have in that REC Insiders, which is our VIP list of investors, we also have a subsection of that of investors only wanting assignments because see, they didn't want to wait for you. They didn't want to wait the way that you did that 3-year period. They want to get something and close on it within 6 months. So we have people waiting to pick that up. The third component that we actually, as Simeon mentioned, don't speak about is the joint venture component. So what Simos and I had to do to get more units is we started JVing. So we JV together. We now just put it out to, we have a team of 40 realtors 32 realtors and 8 support staff. So we actually started to put it out to our team members like, hey, we'll JV with you because I know Steven, my videographer, you can get the mortgage. The problem that I have and Simeon have, we can't get the mortgages. But we have some of the capital.
We might be a little bit over leveraged in this.
Yeah, well, because we're a little biased, right? We like that type of investment. And so we would bring in Laura, and so we bring in family members. Now, because we want to grow it and scale our portfolio, we give up a lot. So, like, I'm putting that out to you guys as well, that we have some of our projects closing. We're willing to give up some of the equity because at times we can't get the financing. And so if you're willing, or you know somebody, and that's what we put out to our team members, to actually put that contract under their name, they get the financing. We build a trust agreement at the lawyer's office that protects everybody. He can't sell it. He can't refinance it without our signatures. And so that's something that you should really consider. I know you guys have, but if there's anyone in the room that hasn't thought that process through, it's something that could be very, very lucrative.
And also bring us your deals. If you think you found a great deal, we're always happy to look at it and potentially participate. Or not.
And just look at it for you and be another set of eyes. I really wanted to mention, because we got a lot of members in Saskatchewan and in BC and Calgary, and it's not happening as much in Montreal, where, like, use us to just look at your deals. And this is kind of our real shameless plug now.
Yeah, that's what we do.
This has been the REC Experience Podcast with Jas Takhar, an REC Canada production.
Hey guys, thanks so much for watching and listening. Please take a second right now to subscribe and follow us on whatever podcast platform you're watching or listening. It means the world to me. Thank you.